There were many forbidden loves on southern soil, but none whispered about more fearfully than the tale of Josiah, the quiet slave man, whose heart was torn between two white women of the same house. One was the mistress who depended on him more than she ever admitted. The other was her daughter, the girl who looked at him with a hunger she did not yet understand. And looming over them all was Master Thorn, a man who ruled his home with pride, paranoia, and the certainty that his women, wife, and daughter alike belonged to him alone. What no one foresaw was how affection could turn to danger, desire to bloodshed, and a single moment of jealousy into a storm that consumed the entire household. This is the story of the slave who loved one woman, desired another, and survived the wrath of a master determined to destroy him. The evening heat pressed thick against the thorn plantation as Josiah walked toward the main house, carrying a basket of freshly split firewood. His shirt clung to his back, damp with sweat and sawdust, but his steps remained steady, graceful, even proud. No matter how hard the day's labor, he always moved with a kind of quiet dignity that made the house servants whisper and the field hands nod with respect. He reached the back door just as the mistress, Evelyn Thorne, stepped out onto the porch. She was dressed in pale cotton, her hair pinned loosely, strands falling around her face in a way that made her look younger, softer. When she saw him, her eyes brightened with something she refused to name. "You work too hard, Josiah," she murmured, voice low, warm. "You'll wear yourself to the bone." He lowered his eyes respectfully, though the corners of his lips lifted. "Only doing what's asked of me, ma'am." "You do more than that," she said, almost scolding, but not quite. "You always do." Their eyes met just a moment too long. She quickly turned away, but the air between them stayed charged. For months, Evelyn had sought him out in small ways, asking him to fix a hinge she could have called any other slave for, requesting he bring in firewood, even when there was already plenty, finding reasons to walk through the yard when she knew he was working nearby. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something dangerous. "Bring that inside," she said softly. "And stay a moment. I want to speak to you." Josiah followed her into the kitchen, heart steady but mind racing. He knew the look in her eyes. He had seen it before in other mistresses, on other plantations. But Evelyn was different. She wasn't cruel. She wasn't lonely. She wasn't bored. She was simply drawn to him, in a way she didn't understand and would never admit. He set the basket down. "You needed something else, ma'am." Before she could answer, footsteps sounded behind them. Clara Thorne entered the kitchen, 16 years old, sharp-eyed, with beauty blooming like a dangerous flower. She paused at the sight of Josiah, her gaze sliding over him in a way she'd tried to hide but failed every time. She wasn't her mother. Clara's fascination was not quiet or conflicted. It was bold, hungry, and frightening in its intensity. "You're late," Clara said to him, though he wasn't. Josiah bowed his head slightly. "Apologies, miss." Clara stepped closer, circling him like a curious cat. "Mama, you shouldn't keep him after dark. Someone might think he's up to something." Evelyn stiffened. "Clara, that's enough." But Clara wasn't finished. She reached out, fingers brushing Josiah's forearm light, quick but unmistakably intentional. "You're strong," she whispered. Josiah stepped back instantly, pulse hammering. "Miss Clara, please. What are you doing?" Evelyn snapped, her voice breaking. You shouldn't touch him." Clara smiled, a slow, dangerous curve of her lips. "Why? Because you want him to yourself?" The room went silent. Evelyn's breath caught. Josiah stood still as stone, knowing that even a wrong inhale could destroy him. Clara watched them both with wicked amusement, realizing too late the power she held. Then, from the front of the house, the heavy sound of boots. Master Thorne's boots. The women froze. Josiah's pulse stopped cold. Thorne never came to the kitchen unless he was angry, hungry, or suspicious, and tonight his footsteps were too fast to be anything but rage. Evelyn's face drained of color. "Josiah, go," she whispered sharply. "Now." Through the back, but Clara didn't move. She simply stared at Josiah, eyes bright, fascinated, possessive. The door to the kitchen creaked open, and Thorne's tall frame filled the doorway, eyes already narrowed, already searching. And Josiah realized in that moment, whether he left or stayed, the danger had already begun. The air inside the big house was always heavy, heavy with perfume, heavy with secrets, heavy with the kind of silence that punished more than words could. Elias entered with the breakfast tray balanced in his hands, shoulders squared, expression neutral. He had mastered neutrality. It was his shield, his disguise, his only protection. But neutrality was impossible when she was in the room. Clara, the daughter of the house, 17, sharp-eyed, restless, bold where her mother was quiet, reckless where her mother was patient. And Elias felt something dangerous stir in his chest every time she looked his way. Something he shouldn't have, something he couldn't stop. He set the tray on the dining table just as Clara descended the stairs, her nightgown brushing the banister like a whisper. She froze when she saw him, not because she was afraid. He wished she were. Fear would have kept her safe. Fear would have kept him safe. Instead, she smiled, not politely, not innocently, but with a curiosity that reached inside his ribs and threatened to crush reason. "Morning, Elias," she murmured, voice low enough that it belonged to neither a child nor a woman. Something in between, something unsteady. Elias bowed his head. "Miss Clara." She walked past him, close, too close. The scent of her hair drifted around him, sunlight and something floral. His breath caught, and he held it, forcing his body still. She paused at his side, eyes flicking upward with deliberate slowness. "Are you avoiding looking at me?" she whispered. "Or trying not to?" His pulse thudded dangerously. "Just doing my work, miss." Clara's gaze lingered on him before finally drifting away. She slid into her seat just as her mother entered the room. Mrs. Whitfield, graceful, soft-spoken, radiant in a way that had nothing to do with youth. She carried herself like the world bent to make pathways for her, not out of arrogance, but because she never considered any other reality. And Elias loved her with a devotion he did not understand even now. It was not lust, not desire. It was something quieter but deeper, the kind of love that grows roots in silence. He loved the mother. He desired the daughter. He belonged to the master, and that was the deadliest combination imaginable. Mrs. Whitfield touched Elias's wrist gently as she passed him. "Thank you, dear. You're always so careful with the silver." A warm ache moved through him. Her kindness was a dangerous thing. A man like him should not feel seen. But she looked at him with soft eyes, never knowing how those eyes ruined him. Clara noticed. Something flickered across the girl's face, jealousy, curiosity, something predatory. Elias stepped back, eager to leave the room before the tension betrayed him. But Mrs. Whitfield turned toward him again. "Elias, would you fetch more cream from the kitchen?" He nodded and moved toward the door. The moment he stepped into the hallway, Clara slipped out after him like a shadow. He felt her presence before he heard her steps. "Why does she look at you that way?" Clara's voice was sharp this time, sharp enough to cut. He kept walking. "I do not know what you mean, miss. Don't lie to me. She..." Clara grabbed his arm, spinning him to face her. "She trusts you. She touches you. She talks to you like you're one of us. It's not Dade. She is kind to everyone," he answered quickly, hiding the tremor in his voice. "That's not what I see." Her eyes narrowed, studying him with unsettling precision. "You're different when you look at her," she whispered. "And she's different when she looks at you." His throat tightened. If Clara sensed it, if she understood it, if she spoke of it, Master Whitfield would kill him. Cleanly or cruelly, it wouldn't matter. Elias's life would end the moment suspicion took root. Clara stepped closer, her fingers brushing the inside of his wrist as if testing something. He sucked in a sharp breath. "You care for her," Clara murmured. "And you want me." The hallway shrank around him. "Miss Clara, you mustn't say such things." "Or what?" She smiled, slow and intoxicating. "You'll tell your mistress? Your sweetheart? Or my father?" Her words struck him like a physical blow. He shook his head. "You misunderstand. I would never." "You already have." Her voice cracked, revealing the truth beneath her bravado. "You look at her like she's the moon, and you look at me like I'm fire." Elias stepped back, desperate to restore distance. But the door, at the end of the hallway, creaked open. Master Whitfield stood there, broad-shouldered, hard-eyed, suspicious by nature. His gaze traveled slowly from Clara's flushed cheeks to Elias's rigid posture, and he saw enough to invent a sin even if one had not yet been committed. "What's going on here?" he asked, voice low. Clara opened her mouth. Elias's heart seized. He didn't know if she would lie or tell the truth or something far worse. But she said softly, "Nothing, Father. Elias was helping me." The master's eyes sharpened, cold and calculating. "Helping you," he repeated, without believing a word. Elias bowed his head. "Sir." But Master Whitfield didn't look at him. He looked through him, as if he could already smell the blood he wanted to spill. The summer storm broke over the plantation with sudden violence, rain pelting the roof like thrown gravel, wind wailing between the shutters. But inside the big house, the air was still, thick, and trembling with something far more dangerous than weather. Clara Beaumont stood at the end of the upstairs corridor, barefoot, holding a chamber stick that flickered against her trembling fingers. She had been awakened not by thunder but by voices soft, too soft, traveling through the floorboards beneath her room. Her mother's voice, and a man's. A man she knew. A man she had long watched from her window with a breath she could not explain. Jonas, the slave her father had bought at 20 years old, broad-shouldered, golden-eyed, and silent as a stone except when he sang in the fields. Clara always found herself pausing to listen to him, even when everyone else pretended not to hear. She had admired him. She had dreamed of him. She had imagined longed to be seen by him. But the sound coming from her mother's room tonight was something she had never expected, something that froze her blood. Her mother's whisper, Jonas's reply, a hushed urgency, a soft gasp. The thunder outside swallowed part of their voices, but not enough. Clara felt a hot sting rise behind her eyes, but she forced herself down the hall anyway. Step by step, stormlight flashed across the walls, throwing long, trembling shadows ahead of her. She reached her mother's door. It was open just half an inch, and through that thin slice of golden lamplight, she saw everything. Her mother, not the cold, composed, perfect Mrs. Beaumont, but a woman flushed with life, hands tangled in Jonas's hair, lips pressed to his as though she hadn't breathed in years, Jonas's arms around her waist. Jonas's voice, murmuring her name, her mother's name with reverence. Clara had never heard from any man. It was the intimacy that betrayed them. Not lust, not desperation, but tenderness. Clara's heart cracked so sharply she almost dropped the candle. She clapped a hand over her mouth. A small sound escaped her anyway. Jonas's head turned, his eyes locked on hers through the crack, those golden eyes widening with a horror deeper than fear of punishment. He froze. Mrs. Beaumont twisted toward the door. "Clara," she gasped. Clara fled, down the hall, down the stairs, her bare feet slapping the wood like frantic wings. The candle blew out behind her as she descended into darkness, but she didn't stop. She burst through the back door into the rain. The storm swallowed her instantly, cold, wild, merciless. She collapsed on the porch steps, gripping the railing as sobs tore from her chest. The rain washed her tears away as quickly as they came, leaving her pale and shaking. She had always believed Jonas looked at her differently. She had always believed she wasn't imagining it. But now she saw the truth. He had looked at her because she was the daughter. He had touched her hand once in passing, brushed her shoulder when lifting a crate, spoken her name softly only when her father wasn't near. And she had treasured every accidental moment, but he had never desired her. He had wanted her mother. Clara pressed her forehead to her rain-wet knees. A nauseating humiliation clawed through her chest, but beneath it, something else flickered sharp, burning, unfamiliar. Betrayal. At first she thought she might vomit from the feeling, but it settled slowly, seeping through her like poison, until it reached her fingertips and curled them into fists. Behind her, the door creaked open. Jonas stepped onto the porch. He didn't touch her. He didn't speak. He stood in the downpour a respectful distance away, letting the rain hit him harder than it hit her. "Clara," he said finally, voice low, trembling but steady. "Please, let me explain." She didn't look at him. "There is nothing to explain." she whispered. His breath caught. There is everything to explain. She shook her head. Not for me. Her voice broke. For my father. Jonas stiffened, and in that single instant, she felt the balance of the world shift. What she had witnessed tonight wasn't just a secret. It was a death sentence. Her father, Abraham Beaumont, was not a man who forgave humiliation. He was not a man who tolerated disobedience. And he certainly was not a man who would overlook a slave touching his wife. Jonas stepped closer, rain cascading down his face. Ilara, I beg you, for your mother's sake, for my life, don't tell him. I'm knowed, I won't, she whispered. Relief shook his shoulders. She slowly lifted her face toward him. But I don't know if someone else will. His breath stopped. Ilara, he tried again, reaching out but not daring to touch her. She rose, trembling, drenched, heart-shattering piece by piece. I loved you, she said, barely audible over the storm. Jonas closed his eyes as if stabbed. But you loved her. Lightning cracked through the sky. And Ilara walked back inside, leaving Jonas on the porch, shoulders bowed under the weight of the rain and the ruin she had just confessed. Outside, thunder rolled across the plantation like an omen. Inside, the house held its breath, because secrets, especially the kind born in stormlight, never stayed quiet for long. The plantation house felt unusually cold that night, as if the walls themselves sensed what was coming. A storm brewed above the pines, clouds rolling like dark beasts. Inside, lanterns flickered against the halls of Beaumont House, casting trembling shadows that stretched like warning fingers. Eliza stood at the top of the staircase, her hands clasped around the wooden banister so tightly her knuckles whitened. She had not meant to overhear. She had risen from bed only to get water, but voices drifting from the parlor below had frozen her in place. The master's voice, and her daughter's. She stepped one pace down, heart pounding deep and slow. I saw you looking at him. Ruth's voice was sharp, trembling with indignation. Him who? The master asked, though his tone held a weary, dangerous edge. You know who? Ruth pressed. Ezra. That slave. The name cracked on her tongue. Eliza's breath left her chest. The master sighed. You're imagining things, girl. No, Ruth snapped. I'm not a fool. You've seen it too. Ma looks at him like. A shuddering silence swallowed the room. Eliza felt heat rise to her face, a mix of shame and terror. She backed up, but a loose floorboard creaked beneath her heel. Below, the voices fell silent. Eliza, the master called. For a heartbeat, she considered running into the night, into the cane fields, into anywhere that wasn't this house, but her feet would not obey. Slowly, she descended. Ruth stood stiff as iron behind her father, arms crossed, eyes burning. Eliza, the master repeated. We need to talk. The storm crackled outside. About what, sir? Eliza whispered. Ruth scoffed. About how you look at him. Eliza felt the air vanish. Ruth, I don't. Tell the truth, Ruth shouted, startling even her father. Eliza swallowed. Ezra is kind. That is all. That is not all. Ruth stepped closer, face inches from hers. You think I don't see how he stands near you? How he watches you like you're something precious? I know he's in love with you. Eliza closed her eyes, and in that moment, she realized she did not fear Ruth's jealousy. She feared the master's silence. He stood completely still, too still. His shoulders rigid, his jaw locked, his hands curling slowly, deliberately. Eliza, he said softly, does Ezra touch you? No, she breathed. He would never. Does he speak to you? Improper? No, master. If what it wasn't, does he want you? She hesitated. That hesitation was a mistake. The master's face darkened like thunder. Ruth's lips parted in a cruel, triumphant smile. He does, the master murmured. Or he thinks he does. Eliza stepped back. Please, sir. He ain't done anything wrong. But nothing she said could stop what was forming in the master's mind. Jealous men were dangerous, but jealous men with power were deadly. Outside, thunder cracked. Eliza, he said, voice unsteady with rage. You stay in your room tonight. You hear me? Yes, sir, she whispered, knowing that obedience wouldn't save anyone now. Ruth crossed her arms, satisfied. And what about him? The master didn't answer. He didn't have to. Eliza saw it in his eyes, cold, furious resolve. A man protecting his pride, not his family. A man who believed possession was the same as love. She hurried up the stairs, but paused halfway, unable to stop herself. "Please," she whispered. "Don't hurt him." The master didn't look up. Ruth smiled wider, crueler, and Eliza realized with a sickening drop in her stomach. Ruth didn't want Ezra punished. She wanted him destroyed. Eliza backed into her room, locked the door, and pressed trembling hands over her mouth to keep from screaming. Outside her window, lightning illuminated the fields in harsh flashes. She heard the master's heavy boots stomp across the porch. He was heading for the quarters, and she knew Ezra would not run, not even for his life. He would stand his ground if the master confronted him. He would stand his ground because of her. Eliza dropped to her knees, praying for the first time in years, begging whatever power might listen. "Please," she whispered into the dark, "don't let him die because of me." The storm swallowed her words, but it carried her fear all the same out into the night, toward the man who had unknowingly become the center of a war of love, a war of pride, a war of jealousy, a war someone would not survive. Night fell heavy over the Beaumont plantation, a thick, breathless darkness that hummed with heat and unspoken danger. Cicadas screeched in the pines. The air smelled of damp soil and magnolia, and every corner of the house felt like it was listening. Samuel stood alone in the smokehouse doorway, lantern glowing weakly behind him, its flame wobbling like a heartbeat. He hadn't slept in 2 days, ever since Master Beaumont cornered him with those dead, winter-cold eyes. Ever since he learned that the master knew everything about him, about Delilah, about Anna. Samuel moved through the world like a hunted animal. He could still hear the master's voice. "I should have you whipped until your bones show. But I want to see which woman you run to first." It was a trap, a cruel test, and Samuel knew it. The master wasn't asking out of curiosity. He wanted proof to justify killing the man he already hated. Samuel's hands shook slightly as he stepped into the yard. Dawn wouldn't come for hours. The house loomed in the dark haze, 2 lit windows glowing like watchful eyes. One belonged to Delilah's room, the other, Anna's. They were waiting, both of them. For him, his pulse hammered. He knew what each path meant. If he went to Delilah, the woman who had gentled him, sheltered him, and looked upon him like a man rather than property, the master would tear him apart. Because Delilah was his wife, his possession, his pride. If he went to Anna, the daughter with fire in her blood and rebellion in her breath, he risked something even worse, making the master's shame public. Rumors were already crawling across the county, the mistress growing cold, the daughter growing bold, and a certain slave man whose beauty made whispers stick like burrs. Samuel swallowed hard. "Lord, guide me," he whispered, but the sky was silent. Then the softest rustle drifted across the yard, Anna's window sash lifting. A flutter of white cloth, her silhouette leaning out, one hand reaching, trembling, almost glowing. A signal, or a plea. Samuel took an involuntary step forward, then froze. Delilah's silhouette appeared in the other window. She wasn't signaling. She wasn't calling. She was crying. Her shoulders shook slow, quiet, devastating. She held something in her hand. A handkerchief. No. Samuel's old bandage. The one she had wrapped around his palm after he split his skin on a rusted plow. She had kept it. Hidden it. Remembered him every day since. The weight of it nearly split him in half. 2 women. One love born of tenderness. One love born of fire, each dangerous in its own way. A twig snapped behind him. Samuel spun. It was old Miriam, the midwife. The conjure woman. The one who knew things nobody told her. Her voice rasped like gravel. "Boy, you can't go to either of them." Samuel's breath caught. "Why?" She lifted a knotted finger toward the trees. "Because the master out there. Hedon, rifle in hand. Waiting to see which window you choose." Samuel's stomach turned to sand. "He planned it?" he whispered. "No," Miriam said. "He cravin' it. He want a reason to kill you. This night ain't about love. It about survival." Samuel's knees weakened. "So, what do I do?" Miriam stepped closer. Her eyes, milky with age, still burned with something sharp and intelligent. "You got 2 women who love you. But love won't keep you alive tonight. Running might. Fighting might. But going to them windows? That death." Samuel looked again at Delilah's shaking form, at Anna's reaching hand. His throat tightened painfully. "I can't leave them." Miriam placed her hand on his chest. "Then don't leave. But don't go to them either." He frowned. "What does that mean?" She leaned close. "It mean make the master come to you. Make him show his colors before anybody dies. And when he steps out of them trees, that when you decide who you truly are." Samuel stared into the darkness beyond the tree line. He couldn't see the master, but he felt him. Like a predator, like a storm cloud waiting to split. "What if he shoots me the moment he steps out?" Samuel murmured. Miriam grinned, one of her teeth missing, the others crooked. "He won't. Men like him don't kill in the dark. They want audience. They want witnesses. They want someone to kneel." Samuel exhaled. It made terrible sense. "So what should I do?" he whispered. Miriam pressed something into his palm, a small pouch tied in twine. "Keep this. Don't open it. When he steps out, you'll know why." His pulse roared as he closed his fingers around it. Above him, 2 women watched from 2 windows, each believing he might choose them. But Samuel stepped forward into the yard toward the center, where the moonlight pooled like silver water toward the place where the master would have to reveal himself, where love, loyalty, and death were about to collide. And not all 3 would survive the night. The night after Elias survived the master's ambush, the plantation carried a strange stillness, one that hovered in the air like smoke before a blaze. No whip cracked, no overseer barked orders. Even the hound dogs, usually restless, seemed hesitant to lift their heads. Something had shifted, something irreversible, and everyone felt it. Elias worked quietly in the pasture that morning, mending a fence post he knew didn't need mending. His hands trembled not from fear, but from the memory of how close he had been. A pistol pressed to his skull, a blade raised behind him, the master's breath on his neck, hot with murder. He should have died, but he hadn't. Because of her, because the daughter, pale as bone and shaking like a leaf, had stepped out of the dark and threatened to scream the world awake unless her father dropped the knife. Elias had replayed those seconds so many times he knew the rhythm of them. The panic in her voice, the master's snarl, the crack of tension snapping like a rope under strain. He could still hear her whisper afterward, "Run, please," before he tries again. But he had not run. He could not while the mother sat weeping in her carriage, begging him not to disappear into the night. He loved one, he desired the other. He belonged to none, yet both held pieces of him they had no right to. By midday, mule hooves pounded up the dirt road. The overseer, Jessup, came riding with sweat on his brow. "Tobias Beaumont's headed this way," he shouted. "And he ain't alone. Got 4 men with him." Elias stiffened. Tobias Beaumont, the master's cousin, a man meaner, crueler, and twice as eager to spill blood if it made him feel bigger. Jessup didn't say it aloud, but everyone knew why Tobias was coming. The master wanted Elias dead, but now he wanted someone else to do it for him. Elias swallowed hard. This time, nobody would be sneaking through the dark. This time, death was arriving on horseback in broad daylight. He looked toward the big house. 2 women stared back through separate windows. The mother's face was pale, terrified. The daughter's face was frozen, unreadable. He wondered, were they afraid for him, or afraid of what their father might force them to witness? The riders arrived shortly after. Dust rose behind them like smoke. Tobias dismounted with a grin too wide to mean anything but violence. Well, he drawled. "Where's this slippery slave I'm hearing so much about? Heard he's causing my cousin trouble." Elias stepped forward, silent. Tobias eyed him the way hunters eye a wounded buck amused, confident, already tasting the end. "This him?" he asked. The master, standing beside him, nodded without looking up. Tobias cracked his knuckles. Shame. Pretty broad shoulders. Strong back. Would have fetched a price if he didn't think he was equal to white folk. The mother appeared on the front porch, trembling. "Tobias, leave him be. This is unnecessary." Tobias smirked. "You hear that, cousin? Your wife's as soft as butter in July." The master did not glance at her. Instead, he said, "Do it fast. I don't want a scene." But scenes have a way of finding men who deserve them. As Tobias stepped toward Elias, a shriek tore through the air. A body flung itself off the porch. It was the daughter, hair wild, face red, fists clenched so tight her knuckles were white. "You're not touching him," she screeched. Tobias stopped mid-step. He looked at her, then looked at the master, and laughed. "Well, I'll be damned," he said. "I knew your little girl was strange, but this, lustin' after a slave? My. The master stiffened but said nothing. The daughter grabbed Elias's arm and positioned herself between him and Tobias. "You'll go through me first." Tobias lifted a brow. "Don't tempt me, girl. I've done worse." The mother appeared next, running down the steps, breathless. "Stop this! All of you!" she cried. "You can't kill him!" She stopped, because the truth caught in her throat. The truth that she loved Elias. The truth that her daughter did too. The truth that the master knew it, and Tobias could smell it. "Oh, ho, ho," Tobias chuckled. "Well now, ain't this a tangle?" He looked from the mother, to the daughter, to Elias. "Man like him's got both of y'all twisted up inside. Maybe that's the real problem." He pulled out his knife. "Let's fix it." Then something unexpected happened. The daughter picked up a fallen fence post. The mother grabbed a garden spade, and Elias reached for the burning ember inside him that had smoldered for years. "This ends," Elias said, voice low, "with whoever steps toward me next." Tobias smiled. "Then it ends with you dying, boy." But he never got to take that step, because from behind them came the sound of galloping hooves, fast, desperate. A voice screamed, "Sheriff! Sheriff's here." Everyone froze. Tobias cursed. The master turned pale. The women stepped back into the shadows, and Elias breathed for the first time in hours. The sheriff dismounted, eyes scanning the scene. "Got a report of unlawful violence on this property," he announced, "and I intend to find out who's responsible." The master swallowed hard. Tobias hid his knife. Elias kept his eyes steady. The mother and daughter trembled in silence, and the field held its breath, because the sheriff hadn't come for justice. He had come because someone desperate sent for him. But who? The mother? The daughter? Or someone neither of them expected? The storm arrived before sunset, thick, rolling clouds that seemed to crush the sky down toward the earth. The wind tore through the oaks with a sound like old bones rattling, and thunder shook the plantation walls until dust rained from the rafters. Inside the big house, tension gathered heavier than the storm outside. Elijah felt it in his bones. Margaret felt it in her trembling hands. Anna felt it with every breath she forced to remain calm. And Master Beaumont, whose rage had fermented for months, felt it as fire burning through his veins. The house seemed small that night, too small for all the secrets that had swollen inside it. When lightning split the sky, Margaret flinched not from the thunder, but from the whisper she'd heard in the hallway only moments before. "Is greater than, he's going to kill him tonight." The voice belonged to Lydia, a young maid who never spoke unless she had no choice. Her eyes had been wide, terrified, darting toward the direction of the master's study. Margaret had grabbed her arm. "Who?" She already knew the answer. "Your father. The slave man. Elijah." The words carved into Margaret's chest like knives. She ran. Not down the stairs toward safety, but up toward danger, toward her father's study like a woman possessed. Elijah was already at the back entrance of the house when the thunder crashed again. He'd been called there by Beaumont's overseer, who had delivered the message with a strange smile. "Master wants a word with you." Alone, Elijah wasn't foolish. He knew the tone of a trap. But he also knew something else. They still held the power to hurt those he loved. Anna, Margaret. The unborn truth waiting between them. He stepped inside. The study was dim, lit only by the glow of one oil lamp. Beaumont stood behind his desk, posture rigid, knuckles white around a glass filled nearly to the brim. "Elijah," he said with a voice like cracked stone. "Close the door." Elijah didn't move. Beaumont's lips curled. "You think you can deny me? After what you've done?" Another crack of lightning lit the room. In that flash, Beaumont's eyes gleamed with hatred sharp enough to cut. "You think I don't know?" he hissed. "You think I didn't see you with her? You think I didn't hear the whispers?" Elijah stayed silent. "Both of them!" Beaumont roared, slamming the glass to the floor where it shattered. "My wife, my daughter, both ruined by a slave who forgot his place." The door slammed open. Margaret burst inside. "Father, stop!" Her dress soaked from rain, hair plastered to her face. She stood between them like a shield. Beaumont stared at her, stunned. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice trembling with fury. "And you shouldn't be doing this," Margaret shouted back. "You can't kill him." The storm outside roared, as if nature itself answered her. Elijah moved toward her, trying to pull her back, but she refused to budge. Beaumont's eyes flicked between them. He saw the closeness, the silent understanding, the truth he had feared but never dared name. Margaret loved him. Elijah, a slave. His face twisted into something monstrous. "You," he whispered. "You're worse than your mother." Elijah stepped forward. "That's enough." Beaumont's rage exploded. "You think you have a say? You!" He staggered to the desk, pulling out the drawer too fast, too wild. Inside was a small pistol, gleaming in the lamplight. "I'll put you in the ground myself," Margaret screamed. Elijah lunged. The gun fired. The world seemed to stop. For a moment, there was only smoke, silence, and Margaret's hand pressed against her stomach, her face pale as moonlight. Elijah caught her as she fell. "No, no, no, Margaret, look at me." Her eyes fluttered. "I'm fine," she whispered, though the shaking of her hands said otherwise. "It grazed me. Just grazed, Elijah." Relief nearly collapsed him, but Beaumont still held the gun, shaking, furious, ready for a second shot. And that's when Anna appeared in the doorway, silent, soaked from the storm, her eyes burning with a fury she had held inside for far too long. She walked forward. Beaumont aimed the gun at her. She didn't flinch. "Shoot me," Anna said softly, "but it won't fix you." Thunder shook the house so violently the lamp tipped, crashing to the floor. The flame spread. The house had caught fire, and the four of them, master, wife, daughter, lover, stood frozen in the rising heat of everything they had become. Margaret's voice trembled. "Father, look around you. The house is burning. The lies are burning. Stop this. Stop all of it." Beaumont's hand wavered. Anna stepped beside Elijah, placing a hand on his arm, light but steady. For the first time, Beaumont's rage cracked. Not disappeared, no, but cracked. The fire crept along the rug like a living thing. "We have to leave," Elijah said. Margaret nodded, clutching his hand. Anna stepped closer to the doorway, but Beaumont didn't move. He stared at them, the family he had broken, destroyed, failed, and shook his head in disbelief, as if he were seeing ghosts. "Elijah," Margaret whispered, "we can't leave him." Elijah turned toward his master, toward the man who had tried to kill him, who had tormented generations before him. He took one step back into the room, and Beaumont whispered, "I don't deserve saving." The ceiling cracked above them. Everything fell. The Beaumont plantation never truly died. It simply changed names enough times that the ghosts forgot which one to answer to. The cane rose where Samuel had bled, where Eleanor had wept, where little Clara had screamed through the smoke, were plowed under and replanted until even the soil grew tired of remembering. But the stories those lived far longer than any deed, any census, any church bell. Some said the house was cursed because of the way the master died, face frozen in a terror no living man could name. His hands wrapped around his own throat as if trying to tear out the last lie he ever spoke. Others claimed it was Eleanor's grief that lingered, that her spirit roamed the upstairs hallway, whispering Samuel's name as though she were still waiting for him to step through her door in the soft candlelight. But the truest tale, the one the elders told in low voices on hot nights, belonged to Clara. She grew into a woman whose eyes held the depth of two tragedies, the love that saved her and the love that nearly destroyed everyone else. Her mother's warnings lived inside her like scripture, and Samuel's last words, "Don't let them turn your heart to dust," became the rope she held whenever the world tried to pull her under. Clara never married. The town whispered that no man could withstand her silence, or her gaze, or the strange sense that she carried more than one soul inside her ribcage. Some said she was haunted. Some said she was blessed. Some said she was Samuel's child in spirit, if not in blood. She stayed in the quarters long after emancipation and long after everyone who knew the truth had been buried. She tended the small patch of earth where Samuel rested beneath an unmarked stone, and she visited her mother's grave each Sunday morning before the sun rose, the way Eleanor once had, though the reasons were different and the pain was older. In her final years, Clara told a single story, only once, to a granddaughter of a friend who had begged her for the truth. The girl asked what really happened on the night the master died, and why the Beaumont line ended with such violence, and why everyone spoke of forbidden love like it was some kind of sin carved into the land. Clara had stared at the girl for a long, quiet moment. Then she said, "Is greater than, because love is the only thing that scares a man who lives by owning others. And when you love someone they cannot touch, cannot break, cannot steal, that's when they start dying in the dark." And that was all she ever said. When Clara died, they buried her between Samuel and Eleanor, 2 graves on either side, as though guarding her from a world that had taken too much. The preacher said it wasn't proper. The townspeople whispered it was sacrilege, but the ones who knew the descendants of the enslaved who had witnessed everything simply nodded, because that was how the story always should have ended. 3 lives intertwined by cruelty, by desire, by love, by murder, by secrets none of them were allowed to keep. 3 souls who had never been permitted to choose where they belonged. At last, they belonged to each other, and the Beaumont Plantation, no matter how many times it changed its name, never found peace again. Night returned to the Beaumont Plantation carrying a hush so deep it felt almost holy. The house, once a cage of secrets, now breathed with a strange tenderness as if relieved that the worst truths had finally walked out of its walls into the open. And in the center of this uneasy calm stood Elijah, not as a servant, not as a hunted man, but as someone whose presence the house could no longer deny. He stood by the back staircase, the place where Marianne once handed him hidden letters, where Clara first brushed past him with cheeks redder than summer cherries, and where Master Beaumont once grabbed his collar and promised to cut the desire out of him with a knife. Now the staircase creaked under no threats, only memory. Marianne descended first. Her steps were lighter than they had been in months, perhaps years. A woman freed from lies, from the cold expectation of a marriage she had been trapped in since 19. She now wore her hair loose, not in the rigid twist Beaumont demanded. Every strand spoke rebellion. "Elijah," she whispered, as if tasting the safety of saying his name without fear. Before he could respond, Clara appeared behind her mother, hesitant, shaken, but present. Her eyes held storms and softness at once. The kiss she'd shared with Elijah earlier still warmed her mouth. It terrified her. It thrilled her. It confused her. All 3 stood in a triangle of shifting loyalties, histories, and dangerous wants. Marianne's voice broke the silence. "We have a decision to make, all of us." Elijah braced himself, but Marianne didn't speak of leaving the plantation, or of how the town might react when it learned her husband had fallen by his own rage, his own hands, his own hatred. She spoke of truth. "For years," she said, "I lived empty. Beaumont took my body, and in time, he took my voice. Elijah, you gave it back. Not by desire, not by touching, by kindness." Her hand hovered near his arm but didn't dare rest there. Clara felt her chest tighten. Jealousy flickered, then shame for feeling it. Marianne continued, "But Clara is young. She deserves a future untouched by my mistakes." Clara stepped forward. "Mama, you speak as if I'm a child." "You are my child," Marianne said gently, "and I see what you feel for him. I also see that it is new, raw, and could drown you if you don't learn its weight." Elijah swallowed. This was the moment. The one he feared more than any whip, any rifle, any night his life hung by a thread. "Mrs. Beaumont," he said quietly, "you both deserve freedom from this place, this man, from anything that chained you. I ain't here to take sides. I ain't here to break a family." Clara shook her head. "You didn't break anything. Father did." Marianne closed her eyes. "Your father is dead, Clara." A truth that still trembled through the house like a barely settled ghost. Clara's voice softened. "Mama, what do you want?" Marianne looked at Elijah not as lover, not as temptation, but as a man who had held her dignity when she had none left. "I want peace," she said, "and I want him alive. Alive, not bought, not used, not punished for her loneliness or Clara's awakening feelings." "And what do you want, Elijah?" Marianne asked. He looked at Clara first, the future. He looked at Marianne second, the past. Then he breathed. "I want to live long enough to see a day where my heart ain't a crime." Clara stepped closer. "Then leave with us." Marianne startled. "Clara, why stay here? Father is dead. The neighbors will circle like vultures. Mama, they'll say you pushed him. I know how they think. We need to go." Marianne hesitated. Elijah didn't. "She's right," he said. "This land ain't safe for any of us." The house groaned, a board settling somewhere overhead, as if agreeing. Clara took her mother's hand. "Let's go tonight. Before dawn." Marianne's breath trembled. "Where would we even go?" "Somewhere," Clara whispered. "Somewhere Father cannot reach from the grave." Elijah looked between them, mother and daughter, bound by blood yet tugged toward him in different ways. This choice would follow them for the rest of their lives. And still, they made it. "Together, then we leave," Marianne finally said. The decision settled like lightning striking dry earth. The house, that old keeper of sins, exhaled one final time, long, low, and sorrowful, as they began packing what little they dared to take. By sunrise, the Beaumont legacy would be abandoned, and somewhere beyond the dirt roads of Georgia, a new one, uncertain, fragile, dangerous, would begin. History would later record the Beaumont family as mysteriously dissolved, its estate mismanaged, its heir reduced to dust and rumor. Neighbors whispered about curses, madness, God's wrath, or misplaced loyalty. What they never discovered was the truth. Marianne, Clara, and Elijah fled south, then west, vanishing into the quiet anonymity of border towns where nobody asked questions of tired travelers. Marianne lived simply, gratefully, finally breathing without fear. Clara grew into her own womanhood, not defined by desire, but by choice. And Elijah worked for wages, slept without chains, and taught himself to carve wood into shapes so beautiful strangers called them miracles. People who met them never guessed the tangled past that tied them together. They only noticed the way the three walked in step like a family built not from blood or ownership, but from survival. The Beaumont line ended in Georgia. A different legacy, quiet, stubborn, unbroken, began somewhere far away, and it lived,